Hello and welcome to the Esports Biz Show. I'm your host, Justin Jacobson. This week we'll be discussing esports coaching. Just as a disclaimer, nothing here is intended as legal advice, as all the information is for educational purposes only. This week's guest is PJ Bannon. PJ is an esports head coach and the author of the comprehensive guide to Esports Fundamentals. He previously worked as an esports coach for professional esports organization Cloud9, as well as a head coach at St. Peter's University, among other esports coaching roles. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So, let's start out. Let's talk about your past esports and gaming experience. What was the first game you played?
First game I played. Okay, I had an SNES at my grandparents' house. Super old. Played games I don't even remember the titles of that weren't. They didn't buy games that were popular. They just happened to have it.
No Yoshi's Island.
No, none of those. Just some really strange games that were probably like M-rated that I shouldn't have been playing as like a 2-year-old or something. But the first, e-sport I played, if we're gonna, move into that territory, was StarCraft 2. I found that in college, and I played it on purpose because my friend said it was the hardest game ever, and I said, oh yeah, well I bet I can be good at it, and then that's kind of how I got into esports.
Amazing. I'm a StarCraft and StarCraft 2 guy, so
Nice.
I definitely spent, more times than I'll admit, my basement, me and my 4 friends on our laptops, 4v4, no rush, like build up an army and then just go murder each other.
Love no rush. Yeah, that's the real strat.
Right, exactly. It's like, let me just build up an army and go for it. So how'd you kind of get involved in, the business side of it and transition from playing to now working in it?
That's a good question. I didn't really mean to, I guess. There was some point where I was playing Counter-Strike pretty seriously. That was my next game after StarCraft. And it was going well, and I was, hitting Global Elite, started playing in some formal leagues for ESEA, if that sounds familiar.
Yes.
And there was a point where I said, like, all right, I'm at a good age. I can dedicate to playing and try to go pro, but at the time, I'm not going to age myself, too many years ago, it wasn't really too much of an option to go pro. Not that it's like easy to do it by any means, but like you just didn't really do that back then. And, one thing that I really loved on as well as esports was education. So I figured, hey, why don't I combine these two passions of mine and start coaching? So what I did was I made this organization called SciComm Esports with one of my friends at the time in order to kind of give myself a platform to explore this coaching that I thought I had an interest in.
So tell us a little about the organization, what games do they compete in, or some highlights of it as you were kind of going at it?
Sure, yeah. So one of my best friends growing up happens to be a much better gamer than me, and I thought I was pretty darn good, but he's really, really excellent. And one of the games that he really excelled at was Heroes of the Storm. And he was interested in putting a roster together to compete at the time, and I was interested in getting into coaching at the time. So we said, hey, let's, you put a team together. Me and this other guy will make the organization, take care of whatever, and we'll start competing. And so we did, and actually we were the number 9 ranked team in North America. And this was at the peak of Heroes of the Storm, and the top 8 teams got flown out to California for like a Heroes of the Storm tournament or whatever. So we just missed the cutoff by one singular placement. So that was probably the biggest highlight of SciComm.
Nice. So how were you able to kind of take some of the learnings from working with the organization to kind of what you're doing now and with Cloud9 and some of the other stuff?
Yeah, I think one big thing I really took away from SciComm is that I was really, really bad at coaching. And I think that's something that a lot of people are not very comfortable with, is being bad at something. And I think that's a critical skill to getting good at, well, really anything, but, esports mostly, is you are going to be bad at it, and that's okay. But the key skill to build, and I go over this a lot in my book, is to identify specifically what is causing you to not succeed at specifically what aspect of what you're trying to do. If you can identify that and make adjustments, then you're learning. Then you're properly gaining these skills. And so really what I took away from being awful at coaching was how to be a coach
Mhm.
and improving myself at the same time.
So let's kind of talk about that. Tell
Sure.
us a little about what it's like to kind of be a professional esports coach, and what's the day to day like. What is practice like?
There's I think there's different levels of professional esports coach, right? There's the ones you see on the stage at the ESL major for CS2 right now who are screaming behind the teams and high-fiving them or whatever. That is definitely a professional coach. But that's not the only type of professional coach, I think. I think if you are part of a larger organization whose, goal is to improve at competition and win at esports, if you will, like you are performing as a professional coach. So my whole point in saying that is I think a lot of people like to take away credibility from themselves for not being part of Cloud9 or something. But I want everyone to understand, like, you can be performing as a professional head coach and not being part of these larger organizations. Um, I mean, that being said, it's hard to say because I've been in it for so long, but I imagine the day to day is pretty much like you would imagine it. A lot of watching games for the purpose of learning the games, for the purpose of studying, your team's gameplay, your individual's gameplay, the opponent's gameplay, the meta in general. Yeah, and a lot of trying to apply what you're learning to the players that you have in a way that they will listen to you, to simplify it.
Right. So it's kind of like you said, identifying, what they're doing well, what some of their weaknesses are, and trying to, like you said, once you identify, now how do I fix this? What do I need to do? Right. And that's, I think, where the coach comes in. And it's weird
Yeah.
to think about in a video game, right? It's like you don't think, and that's why I always kind of bring that up of like, what's it like as, a day to day coach? Because like you can think about what it's like as a basketball coach, right? Like I coach youth basketball, like we go out, we do drills, we're playing the game. I set the lineup. I, say run this play and this play, and it's like you do substitutions. But obviously, it's not necessarily like that fully. But there is some aspects of that. Like you're in the huddle, you're kind of, you know, helping them navigate stuff, on the fly as well as during practice.
Yeah, totally. I think it's much more like traditional athletics than people think. And I'm a huge, advocate for making esports more like traditional athletics, where there's a lot of people who try to separate it for some reason. I find a lot of success if you really try to make it as similar as possible with those coaching strategies and those practice strategies. Um, you know, these traditional athletics coaches, they're excellent at what they do. They've been doing it a heck of a lot longer than esports has been around, and they've passed down this knowledge base. We can learn from this knowledge base. Don't get me wrong, it's not one for one, but I think it's foolish of us to try to completely separate ourselves from traditional athletic practices.
Right. And like these are motivation techniques. They're not necessarily this is how you play League of Legends. This is how you get someone to understand what they're doing wrong and take the criticism, right? Because
Exactly. Yeah.
and I think one thing a lot of people have noted and they're starting to change over time is being coachable, right? Like if you're a professional player, like you kind of have gotten to where you are really without coaching most of the time,
Yeah.
especially really early on, right? Like the top players, they don't have maybe coaches like they do now or even at a younger age. So to understand how to be coached, like what kind of dynamic do you see and how do you, work with that?
Yeah, that's a huge problem with esports, and one thing that I'm really trying to solve with this book right here. It's the kids who are getting into esports, the ones who get good enough to go professional. I'm gonna I'm gonna generalize. This is obviously not always true, but these are not the kids who are obsessed with traditional athletics to the point where they're learning how to be coachable in a way that we generally see younger kids become coachable, right? They're generally playing more games and are a little bit more siloed, though games are a lot more social than I think people give them credit for who are not within the scene. So, one thing that I'm trying to do is to make youth esports coaching much more like traditional sports coaching, teaching you how to make these athletes coachable in this way, because I have experienced this problem firsthand where, I gave an athlete a full ride to St. Peter's University for Overwatch, completely full ride, and he was completely uncoachable, wouldn't follow anything, didn't show up to practices, would show up late for the matches, and what do you do with that? And then, as soon as he was no longer part of the team, we won the entire league. It's coachability is much more important than I think younger people give it credit for, and it's to get that instilled at a young age is critically important.
Definitely. I think that's one of the biggest issues with it. And, even coming from where I'm sitting here as an attorney and advisor to these people, like, they don't understand maybe the value, the insight, the perspective that somebody else can bring, right? They lean on their peers, they see what other people are doing, and like, that's what they think is what they're supposed to do. And, as we know, that's not really the case in reality.
No, no, definitely not. And it's, video games are much more different than traditional athletics in that you can continue playing all day into the night, continue it being social without really getting tired. And what that does is creates this sort of, I'm going to call it a problem. I don't think it's a problem, but in sense of like discipline for learning, it's a problem because you're not able to identify that this is a time for me to grow as a player. If you've been playing for 10 straight hours with the same people and you're just messing around socially, it becomes just this social activity, which again is, I go over this in my book too. It is fine to play video games as a social activity, but if your purpose is to improve at it at an esport, you need to find that discipline.
Definitely, right? There's a difference between people that are competing in basketball professionally and those that want to play pickup in the park every once in a while. So let's kind of talk about, you've obviously worked with professional players as well as, collegiate and upcoming people. So do you think that all levels of skill, there's a need for a coach and there's benefits, or is it just really focused on people that maybe want to go pro? Or, is there value for someone that's like, oh, well, I just want to get better at the game so I can be better with my friends?
Yeah. I think there's a need for a coach at every level. Yes, I am biased, but I think you, again, can look at traditional athletics or at any activity, even beyond athletics. If you just want to do anything and you want to get better at it, you get a coach. What a lot of people don't understand who I talk to about my esports, coaching career, is how to coach people who are already professional. And I say, Derek Jeter had a batting coach. His batting coach was not going to the plate and taking at bats, right? That's not the point of the coach. So, trying to instill that in people that esports is similar in that way, I think is really important.
Right. And then again, someone like using that example, someone like Derek Jeter has been coached all throughout his career from T-ball to, triple A, double A, so it's kind of ingrained to have this outside perspective. This maybe, your little league coach isn't hitting home runs, but he's teaching you how to throw the ball properly, right? Or square up on a bunt. And it's like, these are just fundamentals that you need to learn how to do. And if you're not going to learn by really just figuring them out, right?
Totally.
Certain angles aren't just there.
Yeah. And, one thing I go over in my book pretty deeply, this is the part that's like most important about my book, I think, is you had mentioned before and relating to Derek Jeter learning at a young age, you learn these fundamentals and these drills, right? We don't have those for esports right now.
Right, you have Aim Lab, right?
To make them. Like in my book are drills you can do to target specific fundamental skills that go across games. It's not for a specific game, it's to build skills that are required to compete in games.
Well, I guess let's kind of talk about your book. So, as you mentioned, we wrote the comprehensive guide to esports fundamentals. So, tell us a little about the book. Why did you write it, and what can a reader learn from it?
Yeah. So the book kind of was born when I was a collegiate esports coach at St. Peter's University. I was coaching 6 games, all with 4 practices a week or something. I couldn't be at all of the practices at all because sometimes they overlapped each other, right? Sometimes there were things that, like strategies or thought processes, I really wanted to get across to a certain roster, but I wasn't going to be able to meet with them that week or something. So I just started writing these things down about things I noticed in their replays or things I noticed during practice that I was able to think about, reflect on, and come up with, some sort of strategies on how to approach it. Uh, and then at the same time, I was the esports head coach at the high school that I was teaching at the time. And I started noticing across these levels of skill certain patterns of misunderstanding of different skills of the games or different ways to analyze or whatever, these similarities. So I started compiling these similarities and how to approach them and how to adjust them to improve your play. Um, and started getting into the book. And then on top of that, it kind of naturally, I was able to add in these things, these drills that I was just talking about to teach to people who are just getting into esports to really give you a solid mental and physical base to get very good at esports a lot quicker than if you're just randomly playing and not thinking about it.
So I guess what a reader can learn how to get better at the game, or just how to think about approaching the game. Like, what would you say? And who is the intended reader? Like, who's the audience?
Yeah, I would say the intended audience is probably someone who is, it ranges from someone who's brand new to esports, knows nothing about it, all the way through somebody who is probably naturally, I'm going to give a general range, like a diamond level player, whatever that means to whatever game you're part of. Because if you're naturally able to get to the physical point of being a diamond player, then mechanically you've practiced enough to have figured a lot of the things out that I'm going to discuss. Now, mentally, thought process wise, I think there's a lot you can still take away from this book. But I found it kind of better to target people who are brand new through trying to improve to a certain point.
So is it just for competitors, or potential coaches looking at, like, what would you say?
I mean, it's for anyone who's interested in learning about how to analyze a game or get better at any sort of game. Analysts, coaches, players, vice principal who's considering getting an esports team into the school and they're obsessed with athletics and don't know how it connects. Like it's for them too. So yeah, pretty wide range, I'd say.
Amazing. I mean, it's definitely great to, like you said, you just kind of started with little tidbits, and then over time it just, expanded. And, so congrats on that. I'm sure that it's really exciting to kind of see it out there after I know how long the process takes. So,
Yeah.
it's really excited when you actually see it and it's there and it's in Amazon and everything.
Yeah, it took a
So,
while.
well, it's amazing. So everyone, make sure to go check that out. I think there's some really great knowledge in there that you should be aware of. And, kind of shifting gears a little bit, you've mentioned you've worked with, we've talked about professional players as well as, collegiate, as well as, even younger. So what kind of similarities you see working with, esports players of, different competitive levels?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this question, the answer varies based on your coaching style. And I think with the way that I coach, in terms of like very mindset focused, very fundamentals focused, your fundamentals must be spot on with me. I would say there's not much of a difference because everyone is messing up the fundamentals from time to time, pretty often, even the professionals. And professionals really, really improve when they're thinking about their fundamentals. And guess what? The sixth grader who's just getting into Fortnite dramatically improves when they're able to get the fundamentals down. So the only difference there is then, the personalities of the people involved. And then you're, kind of thinking of generally what is the mindset of those people. So the younger kids, brand new, typically just are there to learn and have a good time and are a lot more reserved. The professional players, the biggest difference with them is earning their trust. And once you have that, they're actually quite similar personality wise to the youngest kids. I would say the
Right.
hardest ones are in the middle, about the 14 through 19-year-old range, who manage to hit diamond by themselves or master or higher and think that you have nothing to offer them and they can't be convinced otherwise because they have everything figured out at 15 years old.
Right? Teenagers know everything, right? Isn't that the joke? They know
It's the
more than
joke,
us.
but you know.
But then the joke's on them when they realize what they're missing out on. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really unique point where it's like people don't realize, like, if you think about it in sports, like, layups and like it's all like their coaches just preach the fundamentals that, like, if you play fundamental good defense in basketball, and do that right,
Yeah.
then your natural skill, your natural talent, your intuition, that will just kick in as a
Yeah.
result of that.
One thing I really focus on in my coaching, that professional players have a really easy time understanding, but the 16-year-olds do not, is that the most impressive professional play in a first-person shooter like Counter-Strike is not flashy. It doesn't look impressive.
It's just
The player screen doesn't move, right? They just sit there, click, headshot,
dead,
done.
move on. Exactly.
They're not flicking 180. Whatever. That means their crosshair placement's not good if they're flicking around, right? The most impressive plays are just like kind of smooth.
Exactly.
So that's one thing it's really hard to get across to the teenagers.
Right. They think about like a slam dunk that you're doing a 360 dunk, and that's impressive. But like a perfect 3-pointer that's a swish, that's magic too. When you just throw it up and you just know, and you just start walking back, right? Like you just shoot the shot and you're like, yep, that's going in. I'm going back on defense. I don't even got to watch.
Exactly. Part of my book is there's a lot of self-analysis and a lot of professional analysis and how to do both effectively. One thing I have people who are going through the book do is watch an entire professional match from a single professional player's perspective. There's lots of YouTube videos online of that. And watch the non-highlight reel stuff. Because that's what makes them a professional. It's not the highlight reels. Anyone can have a crazy like 3K, 4K, 5K round out of nowhere. That's whatever. The professional stuff is when it's really boring and their positioning is perfect. Their crosshair placement is perfect. Their support utility is perfect. That's what makes the professional.
Right. And people just get like, oh, how many kills did you get? Right. Like that's what they get caught up on.
Yeah.
And so what kind of differences do you see? Obviously, is it the coachability, or what do you see between them?
It's really it's much more my coaching style. It's much more individual personality
so it's like
based,
individual person on person.
Yeah, I mean, I try to be so consistent throughout my coaching. It's really hard to identify how I would approach it differently. One thing that kind of made that happen, I co-founded the Hudson County High School Esports League, which was an in-person high school esports league for Hudson County, New Jersey, while I was teaching at Weehawken and while I was coaching at St. Peter's, which are all in Hudson County. So I would have these students who would enter the league at the start of high school, sometimes 8th grade, and I would have them all the way through college, right? And so I really kind of developed this consistency because I wanted them to know what to expect from me and know that it would never change and understand my expectations going into a practice, going into a match, going into a season, ending a season, and, all of it. So I think it really helped my coaching with that.
That's amazing. So what were some of your responsibilities, as a head coach at a college? What was some of the stuff you were doing?
I think that the college scene is broken, incredibly broken. And this may be just my experience, but very anecdotal, but I've heard a lot of people echo this similar idea. Head coaches of college teams are not even really acting as head coaches most of the time. They're kind of department managers and facility managers. And that's a problem. Then, you're not really treating it as an esports team. You're treating it as a gaming club, which is fine. If you want a gaming club, no hate, love a gaming club, but that's not an esports team. And I think there really needs to be a difference. So I really made it a point to make sure that I was a coach to these players. I joined these practices. We had larger team practices, smaller team practices. We had on computer practices. We had notebook and paper practices. I was doing all that I could do to really be an effective coach, as well as a facilities manager and department manager. for this entire
And the
program.
chaperone and
Oh,
making
and the
sure everyone was there on
chaperone.
time and their grades were in and all the other fun stuff.
Yeah, fortunately, I had an excellent assistant who was almost a self-appointed assistant. He was just obsessed with esports, but actually didn't play any. His name was Gerald. I hope everyone has a Gerald in their life. He was just so incredible. I couldn't have done half of what I did without his assistance.
Shout out to Gerald
Oh yeah,
helping us live the dream.
everyone needs a Gerald in their esports program.
So, what are some ways that players can use coaches to improve? Is this like, a business that we're going to start seeing more up and coming players using it, or how do you see it developing?
So that's a hard question to answer because a lot of it lies on what's happening in these players' schools, what their friends are doing, and what the game developer is doing, which is, I think, kind of overlooked by a lot of esports people. If the game developer does not care about the esports scene of their game, especially at a younger level, which most don't, to be fair, the kids are not going to really be encouraged to do anything. So it's hard, because you can have the best coaching program in America. Where are you getting your clients? Like we need to think about this long term. Do we reach out to these game developers? Do we reach out to larger organizations that these kids know about? Do we do what we're kind of doing now and reach out to every single school in America and tell them they need an esports program? It's kind of all of the above. Yeah, kind of a really hard question to answer.
Right? I think that's kind of, ultimately the goal is trying to have this be every level, like every school, like sports, where like the same way you have a coach for every high school and middle school team. Like you don't just have one coach that coaches all boys sports. You
Yeah,
have a volleyball coach and a basketball coach and a baseball coach and a lacrosse, my lacrosse coach. My lacrosse, we had a coach and we had two assistant coaches, right? The
yeah,
football team has the head coach, the assistant coach, the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, maybe got some linebacker coaches,
yeah.
and there's a reason that you have all of this staff. You have these specific position players, and why you start to see it being developed more in the professionals and the pros, where you have people who just work with one position, right? You have coaches that just do one position or one kind of whatever it is, character champion. And I see that's where this is going, the same way I
It could.
see medical physicians and all these teams having sports psychologists and doctors. All these teams are going to have coaches, and coaches doing what you said, not just being the chaperone and making sure everybody has their permission slip in on time, kind of thing.
Totally. And on that point, I think it brings up one of my what I've identified as one of the biggest issues with esports, and that is game selection for these esports teams. I think a lot of colleges, I think colleges need to get this right first, and then middle school, high school will maybe fall in line. Game selection is so critical. You need to be consistent with your games year over year. And if there's like a cute, fun game that's kind of a party game that appears, you cannot make a team for it. You can't. Because, if you try to tell someone who doesn't know esports, hey, I'm going to have a Knockout City team. And then a year later, this guy's like, hey, I got you a Knockout City coach. You're like, oh, no, we haven't played that game. That was just, a flash in the pan. They're going to laugh at you. They're going to think your program's a joke. And it's the optics of this are so important. If you can say to your people at your university who are above you, I've had the same 6 games going for 8 years. That is consistency. That is something that they say, like, maybe we should get coaches for these, 6 games. Like, hey, maybe we should expand this because there's consistency here. It seems legitimate. And like we know as being part of the scene, I would love to just like rotate some fun games in and out. But I think the college scene needs to abandon that and just stick with the games that will be there forever and not move from them until a game proves it's going to be there for years and years and years and years to come.
But do you think that maybe is part of the problem? Like, like, is there going to be a League of Legends too? Like, is there going to be a time when people aren't going to care about League of Legends? And then it's, I think that's one of the biggest issues especially from a business kind of side is like, as games cycle out, like Counter-Strike, Counter-Strike 2, like, yeah, but is there ever going to be a time when people have just like, I've been playing this for so long, like, I'm good? I don't know.
Yeah, I hear the concern, absolutely. I think that it's still kind of so new that we do just need to look at the historical trends and almost be very optimistic about the future trends. So things like Counter-Strike, things like League of Legends, I'm going to be optimistic and say that they're going to be around for at least 5 more years. So if
Yeah.
you're starting an esports program right now in a college, I think you have at minimum a 5 years safety of a Counter-Strike and a League of Legends team. And I feel like that's a fair statement, but again, I'm like a little optimistic. And I think that your game selection for your program needs to be based on that.
Is it, but 5 years, like, that's not that long. Like, is it
Sure.
like, or you just look at it for, that's just like a cycle of students, right? Like, it's like that's a 4-year cycle of whoever you recruit freshman year by the time they graduate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I'm looking at it in terms of I just think there's too many games that cycle in for 3 months and then people get sick of them, and you see all these LinkedIn posts of people claiming that this game's the next big esport. It's like, no, it's not. It's a
No,
fun
the next
party
big
game.
esport is Valorant, and it's here.
Yeah, it's already happening. So,
Right. And so, what do you like most about coaching?
oh boy, I have a passion for education. I wanted to be a teacher since I was in the 7th grade. I don't know why. It
I don't
just
know why
really,
either. Dealing
oh
with the
man,
students, man, is
that's
oof.
dealing with the parents. The students are fine.
Oh, see, that's the thing. I've been dealing with. I really only teach college, so I don't really have the parents butting in.
Yeah, yeah. No, totally. But the high school parents are that's an issue. Um, but what I really like about coaching is that it really is good teaching pedagogy. Good teaching strategies. That's all it is. And that's something that I put a lot of time into studying and getting very good at. So I'm able to apply it to something that is also a passionate hobby of mine. And I don't know, I just really enjoy seeing the improvement over time of players. One of the things that really sticks out to me was my first year coaching St. Peter's. We had a Rainbow Six Siege team. It was wildly popular at the time. It still is a very big college scene. There's some games that are more popular at the college level than outside of college professional level. Rainbow Six is one of them. And they had the college league, and the college league is only PC, only mouse and keyboard, or it was at the time. I don't know what they do anymore. So I had all these players. None of them had ever played on a mouse and keyboard before. So I took this team, and in one season, they went from no mouse and keyboard all the way to being high platinum rank average. And that to me was like, okay, this is coaching. Like, and
I
they
got the
all
magic
bought in.
touch.
Yeah, it felt nice. It felt very validating. But on top of it, it felt nice to see that these athletes were achieving something and they were very proud of their success in a really healthy way. So that was great to be a part of.
Amazing. So, what would you say the hardest part about it is?
I'd say the hardest part is getting past the first major hump of improving yourself as a coach. I'll get into what's hard now about it, but as you're building up the skills, like I started off really bad, as mentioned previously. Studied up, practiced, thought I was getting a little bit better. Entered a new scene, right? Entered the like collegiate scene, and all of a sudden, like something happens. You're like, wait, this isn't working. Like I need to go back again and study again. And that first setback from your initial like I know I'm bad at this is very difficult to get over, and very difficult to study through. So that is incredibly difficult. In terms of the you know day to day, what's the most difficult thing about being a coach? If you love it, I don't know if there is too much of a bad. It's really just dealing with people who don't understand the field. That's probably the worst part about
Is
it.
it? Do you have you had some heated debates with players? Like, have players ever like really heavily, we'll just say hotly disputed what you had to say?
Um, you know, Personalities happen. I think the way that I coach and the way that I approach coaching players, I approach it in a way that doesn't really happen. Like, it kind of can't happen. And I know that sounds like stupid. Like, obviously people are gonna, speak up every once in a while. But I would say in my entire coaching career, I've had maybe twice players lash out, and other
Hmm.
times I make it very clear what the protocol is if you disagree with something for me, and usually players will follow that protocol very respectfully. It's all about you being consistent as a coach and
Hmm.
as a person to them. And I think that they respect that generally, even if the personality doesn't align with being incredibly respectful at all times.
So, what tips do you have for aspiring coaches out there, people that maybe want to kind of get into this?
Yeah, I get a lot of LinkedIn messages about, how do I get into esports? How do I get into coaching? And I think my answer is annoyingly simple. Do it. You have
Right? I
to
say
do
just
it.
do it. Right? Nike tells you what you should do.
Yeah, Nike says it. I made some crappy organization with some friends, and I made it my first legitimate experience. Do that.
Yeah.
Make an organization, do one thing, and do it really well, and learn the ins and outs about it. If you don't do it and you just like read about it or watch videos about it or hope you're doing it, you're never going to do it. You literally just have to start doing it.
Right? Talking about it. Right? It's always people that are making lists. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, and it's just like just do it.
Don't make a
Like,
list, just go. Just
yeah.
start doing it.
So, kind of bringing this towards the end, what's the future? What's the future for you in coaching and, just what are you working on?
Great question. I really haven't thought about the future too much. As the book has been kind of the primary focus of mine, making sure it gets into the right hands. One quick thing on that: I give away this book for free to educational spaces who are doing esports, coaches who need it. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll send you a copy. This is not a money making thing. This is a get this information out there thing. And so I guess after there's no after the book, right? The book will always be there, but I would really like to be a part of helping new coaches learn how to coach, not to manage their game club, but how to, as we talked about, how to actually coach their younger or newer students in these mechanical and mental skills. And
It's
I don't know what that looks like yet, but
like a coaching academy, seminars, like
yeah, and there's a few of those that exist. I don't know to what scale they exist, but that's something that I'd like to be a part of.
amazing. Well, this was so great. I like to kind of end each episode with my three questions. So, what's your favorite game to watch?
Ooh, right now or ever.
You can go both,
I'm a huge fan of competitive PUBG. I think it is one of the best esports to watch. Right now, I've been watching a lot of Dark and Darker, which is a Korean game that's kind of like Escape from Tarkov, but like medieval style. Yeah,
Okay. So,
no,
what's your
no one
favorite
knows it.
game to play?
Ooh, to play. I've been playing Dark and Darker a bunch, but I've also been playing a lot of Counter Strike recently.
Okay. So, what about your favorite video game character?
Favorite video game character? I am not a single player video game person. I truly don't know if I have a favorite character, which I know is a wild
Right, I
answer
always
to the
throw
question, but
Mario, no Pokemon. No.
I mean, I could just say, I could name one, but it's not. I
It's not
wouldn't
my. It
say I
doesn't
have
resonate
one
with
that.
you. It's not a Master Chief.
Yeah, yeah. I just don't play games that really have characters that I would be obsessed with like that. You know what I mean? Not
Mhm.
obsessed, wrong word,
Well,
but
I guess who's your go-to Mario Kart character?
I do like Yoshi.
Okay, I'm gonna take Yoshi. We'll take that one.
Well, I like Bowser in the Smash games. How about that?
Okay, I'm okay with that one as well. So this was so amazing. It was really great connecting and hearing about all the stuff that you're working on. So tell everybody where they can connect with you and where they can check out the book.
Sure. Yeah, I think the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. I am PJ Bannon. I think it might be Paul Bannon on the link on LinkedIn, but either way, PJ Bannon or Paul Bannon. I'm the esports Paul Bannon on there, so I'm sure you'll find me. On Amazon, you can look up the Comprehensive Guide to Esports Fundamentals. Yeah, that's about it.
Well, again, thank you everybody for tuning in, and make sure to check that book out if you're trying to go pro or just learn about coaching or anything. It definitely sounds like it's got some great stuff in there. And everybody, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Justin J ESQ. Check Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube for all our past episodes.